Well, Mexico's Navy says it's made its largest ever drug bust at sea, seizing cargo worth at least $100 million. The operation saw the confiscation of some 8.4 tons of drugs, along with boats and a submersible vessel. Authorities arrested 23 people after a high-speed chase off of Mexico's southwestern Pacific coast. The United States has recently been putting more pressure on Mexico to ramp up its efforts to stop drug trafficking. Sanho Tree is project director for drug policy at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, and I asked him how significant this bust was.
I think it's a little bit overhyped. I mean, it's a serious amount of drugs, but 8.4 metric tons is not a lot when you consider that Colombia alone can produce more than 2,000 metric tons per year. And some of these narco submarines and semi-submersibles can carry between 4 to 12 tons per shipment. So I'm not sure why they're creating such a fuss over this particular interdiction, except maybe that it's the first major one under new President Claudia Sheinbaum, perhaps.
Well, the Mexican Navy has said that this was their biggest ever drug bust, but interestingly, they don't specify what type of drugs these are. Why has this information not been released?
Perhaps they're not back at port yet to give that formal press conference, but typically it would be cocaine and possibly some methamphetamine, and in the old days, some heroin. But these days, it's mostly cocaine.
We also mentioned the location of the bust. It was off the southwest coast of Mexico. Does this give us any clues about where these drugs could possibly have been heading?
So this is a very common trafficking corridor. So typically these boats or semi-submersibles or submarines will come from southwestern Colombia or even across the border in Ecuador, where there are lots of estuaries and hidden places to launch these vessels. And they typically go to either Central America or that southwestern coast of Mexico, where they're then picked up and brought by land and smuggled across the U.S.-Mexico border, either through tunnels or drones or trucks or any myriad ways they can move this drug across the border.
I'd also like to ask you about the use of semi-submersible boats by the smugglers. Now, how often are these types of vessels actually detected by authorities?
There are many of them that are built and used. Not that many get interdicted. The ones that do tend to be the semi-submersibles. So these are big fiberglass or carbon fiber boats that can carry, up to 8 or 12 tons even. And they typically reside 90% below the waterline. So you only see a little conning tower for air and navigation. In more recent years, cartels have developed fully submersible submarines that can dive many meters below water and are much harder to detect.
Well, you mentioned that the drugs that were seized are likely to be cocaine, but what are the drugs that are the biggest profit source for the cartels?
So that would be cocaine, methamphetamine, and to a lesser extent, perhaps fentanyl, depending on the prices they're charging. But it's important to realize that what we are talking about are essentially minimally processed chemical and agricultural commodities that are not difficult to produce. There's nothing magical about these drugs that make them worth as much as they are. What is driving this, however, is the economics of drug prohibition that creates this kind of indirect or unintended price support for drug traffickers, if you will, so that the risks we build into the drug trafficking system make it extremely profitable for criminals then to game that system. If they can beat that system, all they have to do is move a small commodity over some heavily guarded borders, and it can multiply in value many, 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 many times over.
That was Sanho Tree. He's project director for drug policy at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for all of your insights.
Thank you.